Hey, baby.
I'm back, bitches!
The queen is back.
What's up, YouTube land, Twitter land, Instagram land, Snapchat, Grindr, Swap, and last but not least, every single one of my bitches. And I'm coming to you loud and in the color from the marvelous Chateau.
How you doing?
Come on, give it to me.
Missed you!
Missed you, baby.
Good.
Hello. Today I am in my Psyduck jumper. And my hair has gotten so long that I've started tucking both sides behind my ears now. So I'm not sure if this looks better or worse. I can't just leave it like this because it makes this area itch. Yeah, I'm just tucking both sides behind the ears, so this is what we're working with. I suppose at least I don't look like Zorg from Fifth Element anymore, but I do worry that it's a bit like Mickey Mouse. Who knows? Anyway, yeah, it is night time. Today has been a good day because my video collaboration with Sean went up. Sean from Sean the Book Maniac. So if you have come to my channel from his channel, welcome. Have a seat.
It's gonna be good, I think.
I wanted to come in and talk about my recent reads because I have some book reviews I want to do and I have some other videos to do, so I want to get my recent reading out of the way. I also have my tea in my BFG mug. Last month I read Supper Club by Lara Williams. They actually came out with two covers for this. They came out with a blue one, which is the one I originally wanted, but in the Waterstones that day they only had the pink one, so alas, this is what we did. But I do like the blackberries being crushed. A friend recommended me this. She was like, you'll love it. In it, you follow 29-year-old Roberta. So Roberta tells you about her like student days and then everything up to when she's 29. It's like her being a student and then being a young professional. But the main premise is that while she's at uni, she gets this idea to do a supper club where it's women only, more for plus-sized women, and they meet up like maybe once a month or something, and they all cook, they make like a banquet for each other, and they just eat and eat and eat and do other stuff. The novel follows the progression of that. Did I enjoy it? I enjoyed it the most to start with. I was really liking some of the writing. As a student, she's kind of quite lost and lonely, so I could relate to that. Some of the writing was nice. For instance, this is her near the start, when she's come to uni. I'd not met anyone. Sipping tea and staring out of my grimy window, my heart wound tentacles around the city, clutching blindly in the dark. The writing kind of fluctuates from her telling you about her life and relationships, etc, etc, to she'll be cooking a lot. So some of it is just recipes and like instructions for how to make, I don't know, like French onion soup and stuff like that. So if you enjoy books like How to Eat by Nigella Lawson, as I do, you would enjoy those parts. But generally, overall, I find this book a bit disappointing. I suppose that the idea of Supper Club is a metaphor for like feminism, a little bit. In that way, the book tries to be quite radical, but as it went on, the idea of the Supper Club, I was just like, okay, this is what you're doing. I just felt like the ideas around Supper Club weren't explored as much as I would have liked. But the main thing that annoyed me about this book is that it kind of falls into the Sally Rooney style of making your protagonist, oh my god, they're so like deep and psychological and intelligent that they self-sabotage, and that shows that they are conflicted and complex. But actually, when you look at it, the self-sabotaging is only there to make the plot go on. Aside from that, the way it talked about the relationships between men and women was pretty well done, but the self-sabotaging elements just annoyed me. There's one part where she has, they're not really boyfriend and girlfriend, but there's some rough sexual scenes, like really rough sexual scenes. Then she also gets like a boyfriend who's really, really nice. And then a lot of the time when she's with this nice boyfriend, she is kind of an arsehole to him. But then there is one time where they're in a restaurant or a cafe or something, getting brunch, I think, And the nice boyfriend just turns around and says, because you're chubby. Something like that. And I was like, I think Roberta reacts like, oh, that's not a nice thing to say. But then it doesn't really talk about that bit that much. I wasn't quite sure what Roberta wanted. And she also has a best friend called Stevie, who basically is like Francis and Bobby in Conversations with Friends. Roberta and Stevie are basically like those two. If you loved Sally Rooney, you will probably love this book, but for me, it just wasn't that great.
Sorry folks, but that's the truth.
If you like reading about food, I would also recommend it. Yeah. And then after Supper Club, I went on to now, first of all, this cover, I don't really live for this, but the end paper things of New York, I do think that is cute. This is the British edition, but to me, I think the American edition is so much cooler with the, I suppose it's meant to be Jude going like, I really love that cover. I think that cover is kind of iconic in its own way. But generally, did this book live up to all the hype and dissension around it? In a way, but in another way, no. I DNF'd this book. I DNF'd it at page 332. First of all, let's talk about the things I liked. I really liked the setup of it being in New York. A lot of it at the start felt very artsy, and it follows four friends as they kind of age. So they're at uni and they become friends. And then as they go through life, it follows the pitfalls, the successes, the fallouts, the makeups, the breakups. So I liked that setup. One of the characters called Willem, he's an actor, and he was my favourite. Like, he just seemed really, really sexy. So I liked Willem. There's another character called JB, who is an artist who struggles with drug addiction. I was always wondering why he was called JB, and then around the page 200 mark, it was revealed that his name was Jean Baptiste. So at that point, when I was like, ooh, it's got a character about an artist called Jean Baptiste. Oh.
Oh, I had almost gagged just here.
At that point, I was like, oh, that's why, for the most part, it just refers to him as JB. Ooh. And then there was another character called Malcolm, who could never really remember anything about him, except that, did he have a sense of humour? Something like that. When they were all friends at uni, they would like have dinners together and hang out, and they were kind of like this elite little squad at uni. Or college, they call it in America. What I did like was that they will have, this is like near the start, they're having kind of soirees in their New York apartment. So it's a little bit like Friends, and some of the conversations they had I enjoyed. So there is Jude, who is like the main character this focuses on, who is the one you've heard about. So he had a really traumatic past, continues to have a traumatic life. But in the conversations at the soirees, I was really enjoying the way they all interacted with each other. There was one bit that talks about Jude being post everything. So I think Jude is mixed race, so they're not quite sure what his ethnicity is, and then they're not sure if he's gay or straight because he's never in relationships with anybody. He's also not able-bodied, so they talk about him as being post Jude, post identity. So that I thought was quite funny because it's just throwing shade at postmodernism. So I enjoyed that. And I thought the way that the novel veered between each of the four friends felt really seamless and effortless. So I was really enjoying that. And for the most part, I was enjoying what I read of this book. So I didn't after the 300-page-ish mark, but up to about page 250, I was loving this. So why did I DNF it? I found out JB was called Jean Baptiste.
Disgraceful.
And then it was kind of developing with Jude. Jude had this traumatic childhood, and yet he'd forged to have this quite well-off life for himself. And I just thought it was quite inspiring the way that he had, even though he'd come from this really, really troubled past, he was just like lightning rod lawyer, which I thought was awesome. And the way that he had friends, I thought was wonderful. But where the novel started to rot, yeah, I would say rot, decay for me was as soon as he goes off to college, that's when he meets his friends, and then it's like the first time in his life he's ever had friends. Jude never really likes to tell his friends about the more traumatic parts of his life, and I could really understand that. For the first like 250 pages, I was really feeling very close to Jude, and I was setting myself up to be like really like invested in this book. And then he also has a doctor who is like his kind of support worker, I suppose. And the support worker knows he self-harms. And some of the depictions of self-harm, from what I read, which is only like halfway through, were really severe. I'm talking like cuts on top of cuts on top of cuts. His support worker knows about this and is just like, oh, it's just Jude.
Do you really expect me to believe that?
I was like, I can just tell how this is going to go. And then, I don't think this is too many spoilers because I never read the other half of it, but then Jude gets like a boyfriend, and with Jude's condition, sometimes he uses a wheelchair because it's too painful for him to walk, and the boyfriend seemed alright, and then it just turned abusive, and at that point the novel was like really turning for me because it was explaining the abuse to some extent, but I don't really think it explained it enough for me to believe it. And at that point, I was starting to not feel invested anymore. Some of the depictions of self-harm and the abuse was disturbing to read, actually.
Sometimes I felt physically sick.
I remember reading one bit about the self-harm and another bit about the abuse, and it probably gets much worse than this, but there was a scene where the boyfriend doesn't want Jude in the wheelchair because he looks like a victim if he's in the wheelchair. And there were a couple of other reasons, but I don't think they were solid enough to merit this reaction at all. And he's in chronic pain because he shouldn't be walking, like he should be in a wheelchair resting. And the boyfriend kind of makes Jude walk. And then he's in just agonising pain and he basically drops a plate or he falls to the floor or something. And then the boyfriend just flips and beats him up. And I'm like, you're going to beat up a disabled person in agonising pain? Like, who does that? Like, that is like Nazi war criminal level stuff, isn't it? Really?
Evil. Disgusting.
Disgusting!
It revolts me, you scum. And I say that with no regret. Scum, scum, scum. We don't mix with it, we wash it down the sink.
And then there were some other things that the boyfriend did where I was starting to just not believe it anymore, which was a real shame. That was when the things I'd heard about this book, I was like, I do actually understand why so many people don't like it, because at that point it did feel, I don't know, that I just didn't feel like Jude was a real character anymore. He was just, you know, a vacant symbol for the novel to do whatever it wanted to. So that saddened me. And I just feel like, as a writer, what is the easiest way to make a reader feel sympathetic for your character? Just make them suffer. It just felt like quite a lazy way of making people try to care about your protagonist. I enjoyed what I read of it, and then the end of what I read made it tank. But the other part that I was liking about the early parts were that they were actually really funny. It just felt quite jarring then to go from that to like this chronic abuse. So, would I recommend the book? I would say yes, just to see what you make of it. So I would say, you know, read it, and then if you think the abuse is getting too much, just give up like I did, because the first parts were really, really enjoyable. So yeah, I would recommend it. But I would recommend that you go in shrewdly, because a lot of the experiences that I've heard about with this book, it's just been a tour de force in people's lives, and like the people on Instagram who, they just have this as their profile photo, and that says a lot about them. That means that they are emotionally intelligent people. Maybe. I did have really good hopes for this. All the things I'd heard about it, where it was just a life-changing novel. You know, the people that upload reading vlogs crying.
These wounds won't seem to heal. This pain is just too real. There's just too much that time cannot erase. When you cried, I
I have been crying. I'm up to page 660. For the last, this whole section, I've just been hysterically crying.
What the fuck? I'll probably wait till...
I'm not too sure why I'm filming this. It's just all too much, it's too overwhelming, and there's a fly in here. And sometimes this all gets too much.
That was not my experience, so. After A Little Life, I chose Aiding and Abetting by Muriel Spark.
So I had to turn to something comforting.
And I have this lush Polygon edition, which they came out with for Muriel Spark Centurion. So, they're like a little typewriter keyboard thing of her 22 novels. And then for each edition they've highlighted the number this is. So this was her penultimate novel. And then on the back, I think most of the Polygon editions have pictures of Muriel Spark, what she looked like at the time of writing. But so far, this is one of my favourite Muriel Sparks. So I had a wonderful, wonderful experience reading this. It's only about 130 pages, so I read it in less than 48 hours. And you could probably just read it in an evening. It was plot-focused and really highly literary. Like, I was really amazed at how literary she could be in only 130 pages without it ever feeling like it was being rammed down your throat. And this book is actually based off real events. It is about a murder that happened in 1974. I don't really know anything about the real events, but in the book there's this guy called Lord Lucan, and he's on the run. He's been in hiding for 25 years, and then he emerges out of hiding to seek psychiatric help. So you follow the psychiatrist as she is dealing with this patient, and he comes in and he's like, I am Lord Lucan. I murdered this person. I've got blood on my hands. And then she also gets another patient, like, the next day, who also says he's Lord Lucan. So there's a lot of doubling going on in the book. And it's just really, really fun, really intelligent, really well written.
So articulate, very intelligent. She has things to say. She is a woman of substance.
And I want to reread this at some point as well. And while reading this, I had the idea that actually what I want to do is I want to go through every single one of Muriel Spark's novels, like review by review, video by video on my channel at some point. I'm not sure when I will do that. But if you have read Loiter with Intent by Muriel Spark, you know how that is really focused around the War and the Chase novel that the narrator is writing in it. This is kind of a bit like that. So it's fast-paced, but really well done. So I love this. I think Muriel Spark called it a study of evil, and it's also scathing about the upper classes, and it's fantastic. So would highly recommend this. So that's what I've been reading recently. Now, the other day I went to the bank because I needed to get proof of address for work, and they had a book depository thing. So it said minimum donation £1, but I only had about 23 pence in my wallet, so I just put that in and was like, they're a bank. They've got billions, but they actually had some decent books. So I got The God of Small Things, a memoir by Lem Sissay, and I got The Girl at the Lion d'Or by Sebastian Faulks. I've not read any Sebastian Faulks yet, but this seemed interesting. A beautifully controlled and powerful story of love and conscience, will and desire, which begins when a mysterious young girl arrives to take up a post at the seedy Hotel de Lion d'Or in a small French town in the mid-1930s. So now that I've finished these books, I am going to read Jane Eyre. I think I'm going to hold on to Supper Club because I did like some of the writing in it. But A Little Life, I fear, is going to join Ducks Newburyport on the unhaul pile.
And I rebuke that in the name of Jesus. I have ranted about this. I'm done.
Case dismissed.
So yeah, what have you been reading recently? And have you read A Little Life? If you have, what did you think of it? And as well as that, if you are new to my channel and a new subscriber, again, I thank you kindly. So my next few videos are going to be my Nigella Lawson poem, and I want to do a review of the Madonna biography that I read in January or February. So yeah, stay tuned for those. Bye. Tell me why